The Jags need help from people that are currently on the roster. I'll tell you who some of those unexpected people are in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thank you for joining me, Tony Wiggins, your host of Locked On Jaguars, for another edition of the daily Locked On Jaguars podcast, because it's your team every day. It's your team every day. And we thank you for making us your first listen. Also, with a quick reminder that we are free on all of your podcasting platforms, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as the YouTube page. Make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube page as well. Well, day three of technically day one of NFL free agency is upon us. Day three of the total free agency, while I fix these headphones, but day three of the total free agency, where the first 2 days teams had what they call the tampering period, where they could legally contact folks and negotiate contracts. And a lot of that is going on, but not for the Jacksonville Jaguars. We are continuing to see that the Jaguars are steadfast in their approach, that this team is going to retain the guys that they had last year and keep the band together and try to win with it. Do I think the Jacksonville Jaguars can win with the exact same team plus Calvin Ridley minus Juwan Taylor? No. But the Jaguars will add 7 or 8 players in the draft, 5 or 6 that you'd really expect to have a good chance to make the team. And after that, 3 or 4 that you would think would have a serious chance of being contributors. So you add those 3 or 4 along with Calvin Ridley, getting everybody back, and let's just say they had 2 or 3 free agents. That's still about 8 new guys, right, that'll be added to this team. It's about, if you look at a 53-man roster, it's about 1/6, a little bit more than 1/6 of your team. So 8 new guys, 8 out of 20% of 40 is 8. So you're adding more players, new teams, and then they're going to really also have a shot at building more camaraderie and getting more advanced in their playbook, because it's the same coach, same coordinators, same system with the majority of same players. So I think they'll be fine. So I'm not going to panic. But since we're in the mode of finding people that are on the roster that will have to improve and get better, what if they could really get, especially at a position of need, what if they could really get a contributor, a great contributor at a position of need, that not only isn't someone who got better, but someone who didn't even play last year. And a candidate for that is Jordan Smith. And I know Jordan very well. And sometimes on these shows, I'm going to be transparent how well I know Jordan Smith. Sometimes when I do these shows, I always talk about being subjective and objective and just not playing favorites with people. The only guys I play favorite with, I got a soft spot for people that do things in the community and that really try to reach out and ingratiate themselves with the community and put smiles on people's faces. So I have a soft spot for people like that. And then people that just treat me with the type of respect that you don't normally get from strangers. So I can tell you this, there are a lot of guys in that building that are like that right now. A lot. But I had the opportunity to meet Jordan Smith. And once I met him, he started calling me OG and started calling me Unc, because even though I was a member of the media, I don't treat people that way when I meet them organically or when I meet folks away from me doing my job. So I don't do a locker room anymore. I used to do a little bit more locker room when I was on radio, but I don't do that anymore. I mostly just do press conferences on Monday, especially if I can get away. I go to practices, I watch, I observe, and then sometimes we have Q&A after practices or especially during training camp. I hang around and put in a request to do some Q&A. But I know Jordan Smith in multiple ways. I knew of him before I actually met him. And so I actually met him. He needed somebody to trim his hair up. And normally I go full disclosure mode. I tell guys all the time, look, man, I'm a member of the media. I can refer you to somebody if you ain't comfortable coming to me. Jordan was like, no, I'm coming to you, dude. I tried to put him on somebody else, and Jordan was like, well, I ain't gonna tell you exactly what he said, but he was like, I want you to do it. Everybody that a lot of people just tell him come in. So he walks into my place of business and in my suite, and he's literally 6'7". He looked like a basketball player. All right. Jordan looked like he could suit up for a team and go out and get 8 points and 10 rebounds. That's just, and I came to find out that he was one of the kids that played basketball in Atlanta. And I knew guys that coached him because I used to be real heavy on the AAU circuit with some people. So guys that have coached a lot of NBA players that came from the greater Atlanta area. I called one of my guys, and my guy knew him right away. Just like that. He said, yeah, I remember Jay. I remember Smitty. Yeah, he was a good player for us. He could have played ball, man, but he went and played in the NFL. And then I found out that he went to Florida, but he wanted to go to Florida State. But I think he took somebody's advice and he went to Florida. Had an issue at Florida, left, did the JUCO deal, and then he went to UAB. Was drafted in the Jaguars in the 4th round in 2020. That was Urban Meyer's first year, or was it 2021? Yeah, 2021, Urban Meyer's first year. Played sparingly, didn't play very much. And when Trent Baalke picked him, Baalke said he had to get in the weight room, he had to get stronger. And Jordan himself will admit that he had to get stronger and fill his body out. Did a really, really good job at the Senior Bowl when he came out in some individual drills. And it was a 4th round pick. And I don't think he needs to be forgotten, because when the Jaguars, since they've decided to go this way of player development, he's one of the people. He's the first guy out. Well, maybe Walker Little, but Walker Little has played more. But he is the dude that I think about when the Jaguars say we need to get it from within our own. And because they're saying that right now, and they ain't going out and signing a whole bunch of free agents, doesn't mean they're not going to get somebody to play edge in the draft. But right now they have 3 dudes. They have, of course, Trayvon Walker, Josh Allen, and Dixon. Those are the 3. I think they need to go into camp with 5. Jordan is one of them that's going to come back. So Jordan is the 4th guy. And I'm going to give you some insight as to where he was last year. He tore his ACL in training camp. I'm going to tell you exactly where he was and why I'm super confident that Jordan Smith is going to be somebody that's going to have an opportunity to come out here and get it in and really make things happen for this football team. I'm more convinced of it now. And the reason why I'm more convinced of it now is because of the fact that the Jaguars haven't done a whole lot in free agency, even though there's still time to get going. They haven't even been mentioned with anyone. So I'll tell you all about Jordan. I'll give you his history and tell you what kind of impact he can have, and maybe even try to mention 1 or 2 names for you. I'll do all of that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. But first, I have to let you know today's sponsor is FanDuel. I am super, super happy to say FanDuel. I'm telling you, man, it is the real deal. I've been involved with FanDuel for years, and now they're involved with us, and we're partners here with Locked On. Listen, the NBA they're jockeying for playoff position, so you better get going and figure it out. And you can download FanDuel, which is America's #1 sports book, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super, super easy. Now, I know sometimes in the NBA, you might pick a team and the guy doesn't play because of rest or whatever, right? Well, if that's the case, guess what? If you lose, no sweat first bet. That's right. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel.com/locked on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. And we thank you for joining us here on Locked On Jaguars, making us your first listen because it's your team every day, and we just are so glad to have you. New, if you're new, you're not new if you've been here more than long as it took me to ask you if there were any new people here. You're not new, you're a part of the family, but welcome anyway. This is what we do. We kick the bobos about in a very, very casual barbershop type manner. We talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars every day for about 25 to 30 minutes. So welcome to the show. Make sure you hit that like button on YouTube. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button for me. Jordan Smith, we're talking about guys that have an opportunity to make a contribution, especially at a critical position. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Jordan, man. I see Jordan about once a month. And shout out to him. I'm going to probably send him this. He had a baby. Jordan and his significant other had a beautiful young child. So we wish him the absolute best moving forward as a father for the first time. I'm going to read his draft profile for you. Smith signed University of Florida out of Latonia High School, where he was an all-state pick his senior season. Yeah, that's pretty heavy stuff. He redshirted in Gainesville, and then he got suspended indefinitely in 2017. He went to Butler Community College in Kansas in 2018, where he racked up 11 sacks in 12 games. He signed with UAB in 2019, and it paid immediate dividends because he had 10 sacks. It's unreal. And he was drafted in 2020, by the way. Smith was he was first team all-conference pick in 2020 after, again, leading the Blazers with 9.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks among 43 stops. He was drafted in 2021, my bad. So here's the overview. They said that he was tall, gangly edge defender who is lacking in functional strength, but makes up for it with traits, flashes of pass rush instincts. Currently, even an average punch can stall out his rush momentum. So they right there talking about the same things that Trent Baalke was mentioning, that he just had to get stronger. So here's some of the strengths. Loads of production over 2 years at UAB, freaky length with outstanding flexibility. He really does bend really well. Gains separation from blocks with lanes, has burst to hunt and capture from the backside, plays with a good motor. Long strider who chops up space quick to the edge, also able to flip hips and use long levers to pull himself around edge rushers. So last year during training camp, when the team was running their guys out, of course, it was Trayvon and it was Josh Allen first. On the next group, Jordan Smith was in at edge, either backing up Trayvon or backing up Josh Allen. At that time, Arden Key was a reserve with his hand on the ground. He was backing up Roy Robinson Harris. And I recall asking Jordan, I said, is Arden Key in there with y'all? He said, no, he's not in the room with us. He's in the room with the defensive lineman. When Jordan got injured, or right before he got banged up, they started actually, Arden was in both rooms. He says he told me flat out, he said, and this is, I reported this on a podcast, that Arden would be in the hands on the ground room, one for half of the day, and then the other half he'd come in the linebacker room. So he was in the mix to get a lot of playing time. Up to this point, the thing that Jordan, where I always tease him, the thing that he was more known for was throwing up on the field during the preseason game, where I think he got winded and got tired. He was drinking too much water on the sideline. So they made a meme out of it, and everyone laughed at it. He laughs at it, by the way. And also, he's a really, really good sport, and I'm going to have him on the show. The reason why he's not on today is because I organically was waiting for some news, and it hit me that I needed to talk about him right now, because there aren't that many edge rushers left in free agency, and I don't think that that's the way they're going to go in the draft, at least early. They'll probably go with a developmental guy, but they could very, very clearly take an edge guy in the first round. It's just that I don't think they need to be using their first round pick on someone who's going to start the game on the bench. because that's what he's going to start the game. He's going to start the game on the bench. And not until they move Trayvon down on passing downs is that guy going to get a chance to play. So I think the Jags have more immediate needs, especially at corner and on the offensive line before they can start drafting depth guys early with their first picks in the draft. So I really believe because of that, Jordan Smith has a chance to come in and play. He's also a Trent Baalke draft pick. He is the type of player that Baalke has always picked when we talk about traits with the long arms. I'm going to tell you how long Trayvon Walker's arms are. Jordan is 6'7", 260 pounds, and Trayvon Walker's arms are longer than Jordan. And Jordan has long arms, but Walker's arms are longer than Jordan's, and it's not close. So that's why the traits with Trayvon Walker was so off the charts, and he ran a 4.5 140. So, at 275 pounds, he's a freakazoid, right? So where he has the physicality, Jordan Smith didn't have that, and he was trying to get the physicality. And I wish I could just give Trayvon some of Jordan's bend and then give Jordan some of Trayvon's strength. Both of those Georgia boys would be absolutely on fire. I really do believe because of where he was last year, because of the gains, he's running full speed now. He's gained maybe 5 to 10 pounds. He's in really, really good spirits, not walking with any limp. You don't see anything. He's working out daily. They're giving him a lot of attention in the building, doing one-on-one workouts with the training staff. They're extremely happy with how he's going about it, and he's happy with how they haven't forgotten about him, and they're really pushing him along. So because of those things, I think he has a shot. I think he has a shot to get into that rotation and provide some edge for Jacksonville. And it appears that since Jacksonville they're depending on these guys now. They're depending on guys to get better in this system. He is candidate number one, along with Walker Little, like I said, and maybe to a certain extent, Snoop Connor and probably Monteric Brown as guys that they are looking for to take the next step, which probably has them hesitant to move on most people in free agency. And that's why you see them, when you don't see them jumping out the window on some of these players, right, wrong, or indifferent. And I'm not saying it's right or I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm really just trying to explain to you what they're doing right now. That's what's going on. And he's one of those players. So if we're going to start pointing to people and asking, when they talk about development, who are they talking about? They can't just be talking about the starters, because iron sharpens iron. And you see all of these playoff teams making all of these additions, and you start to wonder, what are they doing? Well, that's what they're doing. They're depending on guys like Jordan Smith. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about him and who he is, what makes him tick, what makes him move. We'll give you a little bit of intel that he gave me that helped me out in the draft process last year about someone that he knew from JUCO. I'll tell you all about that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. First, I must let you know about Ultimate Football GM, a sponsor for today's show. If you want to know what it's like to a certain degree to run a football team, well, Ultimate Football GM is there for you. You really have to give it a try, because you can actually play it offline when traveling, of course not when you're driving. And it can be very, very, very challenging. And the reason why is because you really have to know how to budget, how to prioritize free agents, how to draft people, how to build a coaching staff, and then how to manage everything that has to do with your franchise, facility, training coaches, upgrading your stadium and your weight program. All of that stuff is included in Ultimate Football GM. And since you think you know how to build a team, prove it. Download the Ultimate Football GM app in your app store, and Locked On listeners get a 100% free boost to your franchise when they're using the promo code Locked On. That's one word, all caps, Locked On. And you can get it in the game store. It's Locked On. So make sure to check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the App Store. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. And you can start your day here with me on Locked On Jaguars, because that's what we do. It's your team every day. And of course, we thank you for making us your first listen. Your second listen? How about Locked On NFL Draft? That's right. Awesome podcast, man. Locked On NFL Draft. And I want you to hear about this. Locked On NFL Scouting. Make it your second listen. Locked On NFL Scouting with the draft dudes, from free agency to the draft, salary cap management, and more. Join NFL experts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino as they take you through what it's like to build a successful NFL franchise every Monday through Friday. Find Locked On NFL Scouting with the draft dudes wherever you get your podcast, and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Love those dudes. Joe Marino. Joe Marino's a big dude in person, and Krabs always has that hair that makes me envy. Very, very good dudes. You can also find them on Locked On Bills and Locked On Dolphins, respectively. But if you want to talk about scouting and listen to scouting, there's nobody else that's better, in my opinion, than those two. And they will probably give you information on Jordan Smith, where I'm going to tell you exactly. I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to give you a gem. I told you I was going to drop a gem on you. Jordan told me something I didn't know, and I probably could have looked it up. During the draft process, he said, yeah, I like Jermaine Johnson. He can play. He says, but he's my age. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? How old are you? He said, 24. He says, Jermaine Johnson got to be 24 or 25. Wig, he was in junior college with me and high school. I remember him. I said, Jermaine Johnson. He said, yeah, he didn't go to Georgia first. He went to JUCO first. And then he went to Georgia when I was at UAB. And then he transferred to Florida State. He said, dude's like 24. So lo and behold, when Jermaine Johnson starts falling in the draft, I'm thinking, like, how is he getting to the bottom of the first round? And I remember what Jordan Smith told me, and I called my buddy, and I said, you know why Jermaine's falling? And somebody said, he's old. This is a dude that knows Florida State better than anybody. He said, he's old. He's 24, 25, and teams are tripping on that, but he's got a lot. He got 10 years of football in him left. So he told me that little tidbit. So it's good to know people that can give you some information to kind of help you along the way, and then you can recall it. But he's hungry. He's determined to prove that he belongs. He's a Trent Baalke pick, which means Trent is going to give him every chance to make this ball club. A player that's a fourth-round pick entering his third season, injury or not, this needs to be where you start to turn the corner, okay? This is his third season. This is where you start to turn the corner. And this is where you start to make yourself a contributor. Arden Key was a third-round pick years ago. And it took him a while to get going, but then once he got going, he's now on his third team in 3 years, but that's fine. But now this is the way it's going to have to go for the Jaguars. They're going to have to depend on their own guys that they have to develop. I mentioned Monteric Brown, and I also mentioned Snoop Con. They need all of those people, all of the guys that you have heard about, that you've seen, that they picked, and they traded down, and I think they did trade down and get themselves in a good spot to take Jordan. And I will tell you this, Urban Meyer wanted him a 6'6" inline edge player so bad that draft. He said it. And when they picked Jordan, I said, that's the guy Urban was talking about, that they were going to put in the weight room. And they mentioned it after the draft when they were talking about their draft picks. Trent Baalke, I remember him saying, we got to get him in the weight room. He's got to spend a couple of years in there. He was ready to start making a little bit of a contribution last year, and then he got hurt. So that's why I believe Jordan Smith can be exactly what everyone thinks the Jaguars need, and they have it right there in-house. And this is what the Jaguars are going to try to be and what they're going to try to do moving forward. They're going to draft and develop. So look for them to draft more guys this year, starting from the third round and beyond. Another guy that needs to develop, believe it or not, is Devin Lloyd, even though he was a first-round pick, and Chad Muma. They need to step their game up and be a lot better this year. But specifically, Jordan Smith, he's different and more unique than anyone they have on that team. He's the tallest player on the defense. He moves like a T-Rex. I saw him last year in practice. You talk about setting the edge and he was doing all of that stuff, and he was a surefire guy who was going to make that team and be able to give you 15 or 20 snaps on that defense before he got injured. Maybe that's the reason they didn't re-sign Arden Key. Maybe that's the reason they haven't gone after any of these lower ranked pass rushers early like some other teams. We'll see. So we're going to give Jordan Smith his kudos and watch him very closely and listen to what Trent has to say when he speaks about him. I'm sure they'll be a little bit closed mouthed about their current players that they're trying to develop during free agency and in the draft because they don't want to give their hand away. But at some point, I'm sure you'll hear Trent Baalke mention the name Jordan Smith, probably after the draft, as someone or maybe the reason why they didn't do what a lot of people thinks that they should do is just jump all over the edge position. You guys make sure you jump all over this podcast tomorrow because it's your team every day. And it's always your first listen. And we thank you for that. And we're free on all platforms. Make sure you check me out tomorrow as we close the week with more free agency discussions. We'll see you next time. Y'all take care of each other. And thanks for joining me again here on Locked On Jaguars.